Hello and welcome to the opening live stream session on day 2 of the Guest Education Global Leadership Summit. We'd like to thank everyone for listening. A few bits of information about the live session before we get underway. There's a chat panel located on the right-hand side of the GRIP platform. Please feel free to ask us any questions and our lovely moderator will get back to you, and we'll do our best to pass these along to the speaker. Please note that because they are moderated, there might be a slight delay in your question or an answer showing. We'll do our best to get through them all, but if we don't manage to, don't worry, as they're all saved in the system and we'll get back to you after the event. And now I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Scott Bolland, an AI researcher, executive coach, futurist, entrepreneur, and international speaker. Dr. Bolland, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll now hand over to you.
Thanks, Danny. Welcome from Australia. What we've done here, I've done a bit of a pre-record for this session because unfortunately, I've done quite a few events recently where the internet has been a bit glitchy and it's been a bit disappointing. So what we've done for you today is I've pre-recorded my thoughts. I'll stay online and field any questions and at the end come back for a Q&A. But initially, I'd just like you to watch some of my thoughts and ponder about them. But thank you so much for joining me. And I will hop off. Sometimes the things that impact you the most as a child are the things you become most passionate about as an adult. For me, it's education. I was doomed to fail from the start. You see, when my mother was pregnant, she suffered a series of complications. When the doctors told her that there was only a 50% chance I was going to live, and if I did, I would most likely be brain damaged and unlikely to achieve much in life. So the best thing that she could do was to simply take me home and to love me. True to the doctor's predictions, I was slow to walk, slow to talk, and slow to learn. I struggled through primary and high school to maintain a C average, and I scraped into university with the lowest grades permissible. So given this amazing track record, how did I go at uni? Well, I ended up graduating with a PhD in cognitive science, the scientific study of how the mind works. I ended up with a university medal for outstanding academic achievement, and I ended up with a GPA that placed me at the top 1% of the student population. From a struggling C average student at high school to the top 1% nearly overnight. What's my secret? Well, the secret is I am nobody special, and I hope to thoroughly convince you of that fact. Instead, I stumbled across some fundamental truths about learning. Principles that, if applied to the school system, would have a profound impact on millions of lives. And it all comes down to basic neuroscience. You see, at the heart of it, we are all amazing learners, and we fundamentally love to learn. It's how our brain is hardwired. Surprisingly, the highest concentration of the brain's endorphin receptors are found in the learning centers of the brain, such as the hippocampus. And interestingly, these centers are connected to the basal ganglia responsible for addiction. That is, we're not only hardwired to find learning incredibly enjoyable, but we're all hardwired to find learning incredibly addictive. As a species, we're pre-programmed to engage with and master our surroundings. And it's this love of learning that's allowed us to flourish. But if this is the case, that we're all innately programmed to love learning, why is it that so many students, such as myself, are not flourishing in the classroom? And again, we can draw on basic neuroscience to understand this answer. Endorphin receptors fire with an inverted U shape with respect to familiarity. That is, information that's too familiar is boring, information that's too unfamiliar is aversive, but information that's on the periphery of your knowledge that extends your learning is highly pleasurable, and we actively seek it out. And this makes a lot of sense. Think about if you were an explorer mapping out unknown territory. If you simply stayed put in a familiar location, you wouldn't learn. And if you were totally lost and couldn't make sense of where you were, you also wouldn't learn because you couldn't integrate this into your map. The best way to build a map is to actively explore on the periphery of your knowledge. And this is exactly what we're hardwired to do, to actively explore on the periphery of our knowledge. And when we're allowed to do this, learning is natural, it's joyful, it's addictive, and it's optimal. And it's what we all choose to do in our everyday lives. When we watch TV, we don't play the same episode of our favourite sitcom every night again and again. And we don't channel surf randomly. We choose to watch series that have an ongoing narrative, a journey where events are interpretable but unfold over time, or news programs about topics that we care about. And this is true of books we read, the music we listen to, the conversations we engage with others. The point is, in our spare time, we choose to learn. So if even in our spare time we choose to learn, and it's so ingrained in our biology, why are so many kids disengaged in the classroom? Because it's not a natural learning environment. Think of a standard classroom. You might have 30 kids in a class being taught the same thing at the same time. And when you do this, some kids are going to be ahead and bored. Others will be behind, finding the situation quite stressful. Very few students are getting the right information at the right time for optimal learning and pleasure. In fact, one of the largest studies of student engagement in North America found that 63% of students are disengaged. That is, 63% of students are not flourishing, they're simply sitting in class waiting for the day to be over. These kids are struggling not because there's something wrong with them, they're struggling because there's something wrong with the system. The system is wrong. There's a total mismatch between how we teach and how the brain naturally learns. Our children are not failing, we're failing our children. So getting back to my own story, why did I suddenly do well? How did I hack the system? Well, I didn't. In a way, it wasn't until I left the system that I really started to uncover my potential. But for all those years struggling in school, I was still naturally curious and a natural learner. And what I was most interested in during my school years was technology. After getting home, I'd hop on my computer, and of course back then, this was way before the internet, what you could do is be creative. You could learn to code and create your own games, and that's what I did. I was hooked. I taught myself nearly every major programming language and would be up till midnight most nights, either coding or reading up about the latest coding techniques. I was a major computer geek long before the term existed. But what changed in university, and why I suddenly did well, was that I had freedom of choice. I didn't have to sit through classes on topics I didn't understand or had absolutely no interest in. I could instead follow my passion and choose geeky topics like philosophy, computer science, artificial intelligence and neuroscience, things that really fascinated me. I could personalise my own learning journey and play to and extend upon my strengths. And in this context, I did really well. For me, the standardised classroom wasn't effective, but a personalised journey was. And of course, I'm not the first person to say this. I'm sure you've heard this same message hundreds of times before. For example, Sir Ken Robinson said, "The fact is, given the challenges we face, education doesn't need to be reformed, it needs to be transformed. The key to this transformation is not to standardise education, but to personalise it. To build achievement on discovering the individual talents of each child, to put students in an environment where they want to learn and where they can naturally discover their true passions." I'm a lived example of this doctrine. For many of us, Sir Ken Robinson was brought to popularity with his 2006 TED Talk entitled, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" That was 15 years ago. So in this 15 years, with many calling for not an evolution but a revolution in education, what has actually happened? Well, for many countries, including Australia, where my own children attend school, it would seem not much. This reflection became quite apparent recently at quite a personal level. I talked earlier about my own struggles at school, but as it turns out, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I have a 12-year-old son, Nicholas, whose journey to date has been almost identical to mine. This is the kind of email we've received from his teachers. Nicholas is a lovely boy and we can see so much potential for him to do well. Due to this, I would raise some of our concerns with you regarding Nicholas's engagement in class. We're concerned that he is directing his attention elsewhere during lessons, and we worry that this may impact his knowledge and understanding of the subject. Sound familiar? Now, this isn't a one-off email. we receive similar emails every semester from nearly every teacher. It's very much my own personal story being played out 40 years later. He sits in a large class, often with his head on the table, simply waiting for the day to be over. There's no joy in his learning. There's no engagement. There's no personalisation. He describes school as a jail. There are many tears. In 40 years, the school environment in which he sits hasn't changed from when I was a child, and the outcomes are the same. Incredibly high levels of disengagement and wasted potential. But how much potential is there for Nick, really? We've had teachers tell us, like the doctor told my mum, that his results are a true indication of his potential. So recently we had him evaluated by a psychologist to see realistically what his potential could be. The test classified him as 2E, twice exceptional, a term I'd never actually heard before. 2E is a term used to describe intellectually gifted children with great potential for achievement who also have a learning disability or a neurological challenge. In regards to Nick, he has an IQ that puts him at the Mensa range, mixed with an intentional difficulty that makes it a challenge for him to pay attention and organise his thoughts. In the standard school system, his brain is like a Ferrari that's just left locked in the garage, when what it wants to do is speed freely along the highway. As he said, in a way, he's in a jail. And the reality is, what he needs most to unlock his great gifts is a personalised learning journey, which is precisely what his standardised classroom doesn't provide. And this isn't a fault of the teachers or the school, it's a reflection of the problem. With limited resources, where you have a single teacher teaching 30 students at a time, how is it possible to provide personalised support for each student? Up until this point, it may seem that I'm pessimistic about the future of education, that nothing has changed and nothing ever will. But this is far from the truth. The truth is, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future, and I believe there's a tsunami of change about to hit our shore that will totally revolutionise our education system, so that kids like Nick will receive the personalised education that they need to unlock their full potentials. And I believe this revolution is only about 5 to 10 years away. This revolution won't come from politicians or governments or changing curriculums and standards. It will start within the classroom, with our teachers, through technology. Because it's our technology that's rapidly changing. Technology, when used appropriately, can give us all superpowers. The metaphor I'd like to use is that of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. In the Marvel universe, Tony Stark was physically just an average human, but was a genius at high-tech solutions. It was through technology that he became a superhero. And I believe it's also through technology such as artificial intelligence that our teachers will gain superpowers. Superpowers to do more with less, to better personalise the learning journey of each child, and to help bring out the best in all students. And I've seen this firsthand with my own AI systems currently being tested in classrooms with subjects such as maths. With teachers aided by AI, students perform twice as well compared to standard teaching methods. Tech-driven personalisation works and can work really well. What I'd like to do is show you what's possible with today's technology. So let's start with the basics. As I mentioned, I believe one answer to better personalisation is the effective use of technology, and more specifically artificial intelligence. Rather than students working through textbooks, which are static and non-interactive, they can switch to electronic equivalents, ebooks that know the ability of each student and can adapt, giving immediate feedback and personalised student learning journeys. And this doesn't mean we throw out the standard curriculum. It just means we can ensure that students are going at a pace that maximises their own progress. What such technologies enable is not only immediate feedback and personalisation to students, it can provide detailed feedback to teachers, and it takes away a lot of the menial low-level activities that take up the teacher's time. We can automate what is easily automated. The aim here is not to replace the teacher, nor to have children on computers all day. The aim here is to teach the fundamentals in the quickest way possible, freeing up class time for more engaging activities. We use AI for teaching the fundamentals of maths, science and music, and then the majority of the class time can be used for exploring what are the cool things you could do if you knew maths or science or music. Group-based activities that are aligned to the interests and curiosities of the students. It's through technology that teachers can better manage this process of individuation while still working the current confines of the standard curriculum. Through technology, we can better empower our teachers, and we can start this today with today's technology. And I'd like to give you some examples of this with my own e-learning platform, iKnow, that's currently being trialled in Australia. I'd like to talk explicitly about 3 levels of AI that we're working on that differ in complexity and how they can be applied. The first level of AI is the acceleration of rote learning. Rote learning can be viewed as the memorization of information or patterns so that they can readily come to mind as needed. Examples of this include the memorization of multiplication tables, spelling items, learning geographical terms and location names, learning foreign language vocab, learning human anatomy. So let's consider how information is generally learned at school. Most subjects have exams that test competence, and what happens is children generally cram for them. But when we cram, we forget information at an exponential rate. We may do well on the exam, but most of the information is forgotten over a number of days or weeks. Standalone exams do not promote long-term retention. The most effective and efficient way to rote learn material is through what's called spaced repetition, revising information just when it's about to be forgotten. When you study this way, the forgetting curve flattens out and your long-term retention is greatly improved. Some studies have shown that given the same amount of study time, you can double your performance simply by switching to spaced repetition. The second question is, what to do while you're actually studying. Some students simply highlight, read and reread the material until they feel they know it. But again, the science shows this is an ineffective approach. The best way to rote learn material is through active recall, actively testing yourself, such as in the use of flashcards. For example, what's the Japanese word for 3? It's this struggle to retrieve information that helps us learn. The take-home message here is to optimize rote learning for a class of students. You need to know exactly what each student knows and doesn't know, and present the right material at the right time for each student. This is difficult to accomplish in the standard classroom, but actually quite simple using technology. Using technology, we can provide tools for teachers that are the equivalent of textbooks. From a student perspective, they just need to select the topic to work on, and the system will calculate their progress and forgetting curves. And we'll use spaced repetition to present exactly what information the student needs to know to refresh or extend their knowledge. And the kids can get immediate feedback. One of the factors we know is linked to optimal learning. AI can be used to assess not only quizzes, but also things like handwriting or word pronunciation, giving a level of personalised feedback that a teacher teaching a last class simply can't. Flashcards are good for learning basic facts, but concepts in isolation aren't particularly engaging. The second level of AI we're exploring is generative AI. AI that can be used for generating its own examples, concepts in the context of other concepts. As an example, I'd like to once again introduce you to my son Nicholas. From an early age, Nicholas wanted to play the saxophone. When he was old enough to join the school band, there were too many saxophone players, and he was instead given a trumpet that he had absolutely no interest in playing. So he was one of the 63% of disengaged students. I told him to stick it out for a little while to see how he went. Within a month, we received this email from his teacher. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Bolland, I'm writing to you regarding your son Nicholas and his lack of effort with his trumpet studies. His performance and progress is very poor indeed. If he's not going to try, then we'll have to consider him exiting the program. Nicholas was evidently at a low level of familiarity, pleasure and motivation. Unfortunately, I know nothing about playing the trumpet, so I couldn't help him. I could, however, write software that could. Here I use myself as the subject of the experiment. Firstly, what the software can do, it can provide detailed feedback on pitch and tone, something I couldn't do as a teacher or parent. Over time, iKnow introduces new concepts. How iKnow differs from other systems is that given the learning profile of the student, it can actually compose its own music for the student to play that's matched to what the student most needs to practice at each point in time for maximal learning and enjoyment. Within a few weeks, Nicholas had moved to excellent progress. 2 years on, before moving to high school, he was still in the school band and loved performing in concert. And to me, this is the power of AI. It's able to move struggling and disengaged students into their maximal learning zones. And this approach can be used in a wide range of contexts. For example, this is the adaptive algorithm being used for teaching typing. It starts out with a letter at a time and monitors what the student is getting right and wrong. And over time, with more letters, the system starts composing its own sentences matched to the letters the student most needs to practice. And we can do similar things with language learning. Here, iKnow is generating live conversations. Again, the content of the conversation is generated on the fly to best match what the student needs to practice or refresh. Sentences based on spaced repetition and forgetting curves. This is the kind of thing we can do with today's technology. And this is just the start. The next level up is to immerse this technology in even more engaging environments such as virtual reality and simulated worlds. And we'll be even able to use techniques such as posture or gesture recognition to help teach physical activities such as dance, yoga, and martial arts, or activities related to vocational training. All of these things are possible with today's technology. Now, earlier I said that I believe that there's a tsunami of educational change about to hit our shore. That it is technologies such as AI that are likely to revolutionize education in only a matter of years. Why do I think that? Well, what's interesting is the above applications are things we can do with today's technology. But even more interesting is that our technology is changing, and it's changing exponentially. With exponential change, change isn't gradual, but it feeds off itself, and the rate of change gets faster and faster. The point is that although initial change might seem slow and unimpressive, exponential change quickly becomes a disruptive force. And we've all experienced this with COVID-19. And we're now beginning to see this disruption in AI. Up until around 10 years ago, we were experiencing a long winter of reduced funding and interest in AI. It simply hadn't lived up to the hype. But now we're very much in the AI spring, where AI is outperforming humans in a wide range of tasks. Things that seemed impossible 10 years ago are now a reality. For example, with deep learning technologies, AI can learn incredibly difficult tasks from experience. For example, the AlphaZero algorithm developed by Google and DeepMind just took 4 hours playing against itself to reach a level of performance where it can outperform any human player. These deep learning algorithms can be used in a wide range of tasks, from handwriting recognition through to speech recognition, language translation, and even creativity. Here is a system that generates faces, cars, and interior design. None of these objects exist in the real world. They're generated in real time by a neural network that's been trained on real-world images. The point is, computers are doubling in speed and power nearly every year, and so are the advances in technologies such as AI. The rate of progress is getting faster and faster. Applying such exponential technologies in the classroom, we will see some radical changes, and in the very near future, way before educational change is carried out at a political level, or there are radical changes to standardization or the curriculum. It's the teachers that will be empowered. Like Iron Man, I believe they will find their superpowers through technology. The future of education is incredibly exciting. And with this shift, we'll be able to have time to go beyond the standard curriculum. As many other speakers have mentioned, a full education is not just about the standard STEM subjects. If the role of education is to skill up children to flourish in life, there are key competencies such as empathy, resilience, positive relationships, teamwork, and passion and purpose that are fundamental. And going back to my original description, I think such aspects need to be central to any educational system. AI is incredibly good at teaching the fundamentals, but this can be used for freeing up the class time for more meaningful group-based activities. And it's in these projects and interactions that we can coach and explore the equally important social and emotional competencies that are central to human flourishing. What this all comes down to is this. The role of education should be to skill up children to flourish in life, to prepare them not just technically but psychologically, socially and morally to live a full, rich and valued life, not just for their own self-actualization but for the betterment of society. As it stands, unfortunately, standardised education has not unlocked human potential the way it could. Most students still fall through the cracks of a broken system. But there is change on the horizon, and I believe this change will be profound. It will come fast, and it will be profoundly good. The thing that is changing most rapidly is our technology, and it's through such technology that we can augment our own capabilities. I believe AI in the classroom will imbue teachers with superpowers, enabling them to create personalised learning experiences that will draw out the best in our students. Change is coming. The revolution in education is very much on its way. It's an amazing time for us all. I hope to speak with you all again soon in the future. Thank you.
Hi, Danny. How's it going?
Hi, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Bolland, for your presentation. That was very insightful and inspiring. So as you can see, we've had some really good questions come in, so perhaps we can allocate the final few minutes to answer some of them. And for the ones that we can't get to, we'll pass them on to you right after the session. So would you like to choose which questions you'd like to answer first?
I'd like to try and answer them all at once.
Perfect. So let's do it.
No, I think when people start asking, well, what's the future going to be like? What are the skills? What is the classroom going to end up looking like? These are questions that we can't answer. We can crystal ball the future as much as we like, but I think it comes down to what's called complexity. So a complex problem is something that you can't think your way forward, right? There isn't enough information to make these accurate predictions. And so much of the world is complex in nature. I can't predict who my best friend's going to be. I can't walk into a room and say, you're going to be my best friend, meeting a few people. It will evolve over time. And a lot of these answers to these questions that people are posing at this point in time will evolve over time in terms of what will the best school systems look like. I can't answer that. But what you can do is just think about what you need to do with this journey is to prototype ideas, is to explore, over time what works. But the important thing is to have metrics for evaluating these systems. So what is it that we're trying to optimize? And that's the important question. And I think it's far more than what we're trying to optimize at this point in time, which is around, academic performance. I think we need to start evaluating things like empathy, soft skills, all of these sorts of things. So what is it that's required to live a full, rich and valued life? And use that as the outcome metric and prototype as many ideas. Whatever works is my answer. So the answer to all of these questions is whatever will work, and we need to explore them, and we need to have an open mind. We need to evaluate what's going on. We need to be creative. We need to explore a whole range of possibilities in parallel, and over time, hopefully, some of these answers will emerge. But as I said, I'm not going to crystal ball the future. It is about what the world provides at that point in time, what opportunities are going to be. It's the match between what the world is providing and where we would like it to head. We need a clear vision of what good education looks like. As I said, it needs to be this global thing. It's not just academic performance. And then prototype whatever ideas come along. If that as I said, I'll try to answer one of these.
Right. Yeah, thank you. But we've just got another one actually just come in from John Coward.
Yeah.
He's asking, for universities that create teacher training models, what should they now include given the impact of advancements in technology?
So I think the interesting thing is I think technology itself needs to be simple. So it needs to be, I don't think a teacher really needs to learn all that much. I think it's the software designers that have to make the technology seamless. When you design technology, you talk about things like affordances, that somebody walking into your system will know how to use it without having to read a manual. So in terms of the sorts of training that they need this point in time, I don't think it's really around the technical competencies. I think it's more about the coaching. I think it's more about, okay, moving away from the sage on the stage to the guide by the side. That mentality is I think where the training will be, not in the technology. The technology, if it's done right, will be seamless. It will be, it's kind of like Google Maps. You basically, there's 2 buttons that you need to know, and that's about it. If we do technology properly, that's how simple it's going to be. And that's what a good software system should be like. It should be easy for anybody to use. So I don't particularly think that we need training around those things. I think it's more about the training that we need is around what is required to teach somebody or to coach somebody around these other competencies, like dealing with complexity, dealing with all of these open-ended questions. And my fireside chat was really around that skill set. So if you're interested in learning more about my thoughts, have a look at the fireside chat. But as I said, I don't think the technology will be that, you need to train anybody around that if it's done right. I think it's how we retrain these other competencies so that education is exciting, so that people are bringing about the passion in the classroom. That's where I think the training needs to occur.
Brilliant, thank you so much, and we'll include the link as well to your fireside chat and the live chat panel on the virtual event platform. Thank you so much, Dr. Bolland. It was a pleasure having you join us today. And for the audience, you'll be redirected to a short survey once we end the session. So please tell us what you thought. If there are any topics you'd like or suggestions of speakers you'd like to hear from. We're on social media as well during the event. So if you want to connect there, follow us at Guest Education on Twitter and use the hashtag #GuestGlobal. A massive thank you once again to Dr. Scott Bolland and also you, our audience. Don't forget, we've got a really interesting session coming up in around 10 to 15 minutes that'll talk about the pandemic's impact on students, how they've coped with online learning, their transition to higher education, and their career choices. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Take care and see you again soon.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.